you went to another studio or whatever, you're working on your laptop and you forgot your iLock. You can't open Pro Tools, you can't work on a project, you're losing money. Reaper, you could download it. It takes 2 minutes or less to download it, install it, and you can be up and running right away. Even if you don't have your license key, you can still run Reaper.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hello, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. I created this show to introduce you to real-world recording professionals to hear their stories and learn from their experiences so that you can take your records to the next level and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jon Tidey, a home studio engineer, blogger, podcaster, and audio jack of all trades from Vancouver, British Columbia. Jon has quite a few things going on, including epicsounds.ca, audiogeekzine.com, reaperblog.net, and homerecordingshow.com. He is a self-described mix guy and mic slinger who selected Reaper as his DAW of choice. In 2010, Jon started reaperblog.net, where you can find over 100 free videos teaching you how to use Reaper for your studio. The aim of Reaper Blog is to be an indispensable resource for the user community, providing news, reviews, tips and tricks, and detailed tutorials on music production using the Reaper software. And now he has also launched an in-depth course called Mixing in Reaper, Volumes 1 and 2, to show you exactly how he mixes a song from organization through mastering. So if you are ready to truly learn how to use Reaper for your recordings, then you have come to the right place. If you don't already know about Reaper, it's a super powerful DAW that also happens to be super affordable and flexible. For me, it was a little bit intimidating when I first tried it out, so it's awesome to have an expert like Jon here on the show to tell us more about it. Please welcome Jon Tidey to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jon, are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure, dude. So can you introduce yourself in your own words, too?
Well, you pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say. I was a Pro Tools user ever since going to audio school in Toronto. And then I was using Pro Tools up to like version 8, and I just got really sick of that company. I couldn't trust them, and they were outright lying at that time to their customers. So I saw some people switching over to Reaper. I tried it out. I got some tips from the community, and then finally it clicked. I spent probably a year playing with it off and on. It opened so fast, so it was so great to if I just wanted to play guitar real quick, it would launch in 5 seconds, and I was recording in another 5 seconds. So it was a big change from Pro Tools, which would take several minutes to start up and get recording.
Yeah, having that speed of startup is really critical when you're trying to have an inspired moment.
And once I started using it for mixing, I realized how powerful it was. The program is so efficient that I could run twice as many tracks with twice as many plugins, and I had a wider variety of plugins available. I wasn't stuck with just RTAS for plugins.
Yeah.
So, and then I was also editing podcasts at that time, and not having to do real-time bounces for hour-long shows was a huge benefit. And that really got me editing fast in Reaper.
Yeah, I can attest to that as a podcast maker myself. You know, to do a real-time bounce for an hour-long podcast, you're going to need quite a lot of time on your hands.
Yep.
So, and I'm guessing you also maybe don't need to use an iLock when you want to start up your copy of Reaper.
That's right. Yeah, there's no copy protection. There's a little license file that gets emailed to you. You copy the code in your email. Once you start up Reaper for the first time, it recognizes that being in your clipboard, and it's authorized. So you just have to do that once, and you can do that for as many computers as you own.
Now, does Reaper run on Macs and PCs and other things?
Yeah, it's compatible with all the current and many of the previous operating systems. I think going back to Windows XPs, it'll still work. Obviously, your computer's not going to be as powerful, and maybe use a version that's a little more appropriate for that era.
You mean if you're using an older computer for Reaper?
Yeah. You use version 3.2 or 4.
Yeah. What are you using for a computer?
I have a 2012 27-inch iMac. It's a i7 processor, and it's running 10.10.
Okay, cool.
So that's the last version that works with my audio interface. I mean, everything's working great for me, so.
Well, so now tell us a little bit more about Reaper. I mean, I remember the first time I heard about it, it sounded fascinating. And I think I read about it in Tape Op magazine. And it just sounded like it did a lot of cool stuff and it had all these features to it that were really cool. I did find myself being a little overwhelmed trying to figure it out. So again, I'm glad to have you on the show because obviously you know your way in and out of this thing. You're like our tour guide through the jungle. What is so cool about Reaper?
I think the biggest appeal, at least for me, is the customizability. So if you come from Cubase or you come from Pro Tools or Logic, you're used to the way that the mouse works when you move it over an item, or you're used to the way that the mouse wheel scrolls, used to the certain keys doing certain things on your keyboard. All of that can be changed in Reaper. So it's completely open, and to a larger degree than any other program like Sonar or Cubase or Logic. They have customizable keyboard shortcuts, but not like this.
Mm-hmm. So you can set it up to just do anything you want.
Yeah. So you can assign a key to an action, but you can also create your own actions. So you can chain multiple actions together that can be triggered by one key or one button press or a toolbar button or triggered from a MIDI controller. So the flexibility there for making it suited to you is just tremendous.
Okay, so you find yourself doing some repeated task. You're editing drums, you're always doing this one thing, and then you can just program it to hit one button and it'll just do what normally might have taken you a few minutes to kind of click through?
Yeah, something that would take hours can be condensed into a few minutes.
Wow.
Just something like, let's say you drag over a piece of audio where you want to turn the volume down. So I have that set to the comma key. I make a time selection, press the comma, and it turns down the item by 2 dB. I was using that a lot for podcast editing. Mm-hmm. So someone shouts or something like that, or wherever everyone is laughing, I can make a selection. I press that button. It's splitting, making automatic crossfades on either side, turning down the item by 2 dB.
What if nobody's laughing on the podcast? Can you press a button and get everybody to start laughing? That would be helpful.
Usually it's dick jokes that works for that.
All right. I'll confess there are a lot of dudes who listen to the podcast. Ladies, hopefully we're staying within the realm of interesting here. But so tell me a little bit more about what about for a beginner coming into Reaper? The notion of customizability sounds fascinating, but for somebody who's just starting out, maybe they don't really know how they want to customize something. Do you still find that Reaper is a good place to start for somebody who just is learning how to do this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's tons of resources available that show all the default settings or show how to use Reaper with the default settings. So there's the Reaper user guide, which was actually created by a user, not officially by the company. And there's videos on multiple sites. My sort of niche for the tutorials and everything is for people that want more than that. They want to, all the sort of intermediate and advanced topics I try to cover. And the beginner stuff is well covered. I really encourage people to think about what they want anything to do and what can they do to do things in fewer steps or without having to think about it, and find the best way for that. That could be a toolbar button, that could be a right-click menu, that could be a keyboard shortcut, that could be a mouse modifier. So just thinking about your workflow. And if you're totally new to it, just work through the defaults until you find something that's too slow. I don't think the defaults are very good for me. Right. A lot of people use it just with stock settings.
Right.
Fine.
Now, what about how often do you go from one environment like your home studio with Reaper in it to somebody else's studio with Reaper, and how relevant is it that the key commands match up from space to space? How do you deal with something like that?
Well, in worst case scenario, I just download my configuration out of Dropbox because I back up my system configuration to Dropbox every night at midnight. So worst case scenario, if something's not working and I can't figure out through the menus or whatever, I can just download my version of Reaper and it's exactly the same. So, but otherwise, I kind of know just from experience for, using Reaper for 6 years, that if there's something I want to happen, it's got to be in the action list or it's in the preferences. And everything is searchable. So open up the action list where all of your keyboard shortcuts and everything is. You can search by the key. So you press the key and it will show what it's linked to. Or you can search by name and it filters the list for you. So there's always, 10 different ways to do everything in Reaper. Sometimes it's a matter of do you want to split the item and select the item on the left side or the right side, select none. There's so many variables and that makes it so flexible.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really cool. I love the idea of being able to customize it to what we want. I know that sometimes just figuring out what you want can be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a process for taking notes on your own process so that you know when there's an opportunity to create a customized, one button click version instead. Do you have a process, anything you'd like to share with our listeners about how you know when it's time for you to condense 10 moves down into one in Reaper and program a single button command?
Well, I think for me, it's a little different because I do so many videos. So I actually have the opportunity to watch myself work a lot. Between Mixing in Reaper Volume 1 and Mixing in Reaper Volume 2, I did a lot of customization and optimization and really improved my workflow. And those videos are absolutely worth watching, part 1 and 2, because there's so many tips. And I forced myself to do different things in the second one. So I'm not doing the same routine and teaching people new things. I think you just kind of know. You realize that you're getting stuck on a certain thing, or you're constantly, if you have to search Google for something multiple times, then you probably need to stop and think about how you can do it better.
Yeah. I like to keep a notepad by the console or, up near the volume knob so that I can just jot down notes as I'm working. Because sometimes I know it's distracting. You want to streamline something, but you don't want to stop what you're editing right then. You want to come back and streamline it later. So
yeah. I have a good team of people I can call upon if I can't figure out something with a custom action. Reaper is also open to scripts using the EEL and Lua scripting languages, so as well as Python. So if you can't figure it out with a custom action using just chaining actions that are available in Reaper, you can do a custom script, and it's even more powerful.
Wow.
That way.
All
but
right.
there's a bigger learning curve there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared right now.
Yeah, but luckily I know all the people that write scripts, and often I can pitch them an idea and it's done in the same day.
Very cool.
It's something that you can learn if you're really into it. Then you can learn that stuff and you can make some really incredible stuff.
But a reminder, if you're just at the very, very beginning of recording in a home studio, don't be afraid to get into Reaper. You don't have to start learning how to program in Python immediately.
No, absolutely not. I didn't even think about scripting until last year when I was seeing the really cool stuff that people were building. Once it's built and it's shared on the forum, you can just download that, add it to Reaper, and call upon it from the action list. So you don't have to know how it works.
Interesting.
Or how it was made. You can just take advantage of this work. And as far as I know, all the scripts that have been released so far have been free.
Very cool. So I've been working in Pro Tools for years and years, and there have been many times where I saw an opportunity to do something better, and I sort of had to resign myself to just saying, well, geez, it would be so cool if somebody made a plugin for this, and that was the end of that thought. So the idea that you can get more advanced and deeper into it and start to write your own systems for getting the program to do things the way you want to work, that's a real investment for somebody who's starting out now and they think they're going to be recording 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Knowing that they'll be able to really get deeper and deeper into this tool is pretty encouraging.
Yeah, when I was using Pro Tools, I had to use some third-party software to customize shortcuts and things like that to create macros.
Mm-hmm.
And all the people that I know that are really fast at Pro Tools are still doing that.
Yeah.
But all that functionality is included with Reaper.
Very cool. Well, so now, Jon, can you start us off on the podcast here? I know we've already kind of dived in, but can you launch us with a bit of an inspirational quote, something to kind of get us psyched up about recording in the studio?
Okay, I'll share my 2-step mixing process. How about that?
Sounds good.
So you've probably seen a lot of articles and videos on 10 steps to mixing or 5 steps to mixing. First you do this, first you do this. There's 2 steps, right? First, you listen. Second, you react. And that's all there is to it. You have your library of techniques and plugins and everything. You learn them and you figure out what they're good for. You listen to the song, the track, the vocal, whatever, and you pick from your library of techniques and apply it. And then listen again. And if it's not right, you do something else. But just listen and react. So don't do anything without first listening. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah. That happens more often than we're willing to admit in the studio. We just start doing without even knowing why we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of templates and presets, but I do rely on them a lot, especially because I make my own. So I spend a lot of time creating starting points, and I do a lot of A/B comparisons of things. Not necessarily I don't often put up 3 different compressors and then A/B them. I will put up a compressor that I think is going to work. I listen and see if it's better, and then I start tweaking things, or I'll call up a preset that I made for, the last time I worked on something like this, and then I always tweak. Yeah, so I would say don't be afraid of templates and presets if they're your own. Don't call up, don't call up your call up Ozone and go for EDM master and call it a day.
Unless you really literally have no time at all, right? No. I would say that the funny thing about templates is, templates are not the answer to your problem. They're just hopefully a shortcut towards the answer. Mm-hmm. So it's not that you need a template is neither a good nor a bad thing. Well, it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. But in other words, if you're going to do something and you're going to have to try, one of 3 choices, and each one of those choices takes 5 steps just to get it ready before you can listen to it, that's to me where the template comes into play. If you can have a template that skips the 5 steps so that you can get right to that point where you can even audition your idea and see if you like it, then it's really useful.
Yeah, something I did in Reaper last night was there's a JS format plugin that comes with Reaper that splits the audio into 5 different bands. And so I set up the routing so that each band goes to a separate track. So there's got 5 tracks, and I send audio into it, and then I've got 5 different faders for my frequency bands for that. It's a neat way of working. And
so you kind of made yourself a graphic EQ almost.
Kind of, but each of those tracks has an effects chain. So I can add a tape delay to just the mid-range. I can add wideners to the super high frequencies. So you can do a lot of weird stuff with that, and it's an interesting way of working. But I have a template now, so I don't need to spend half an hour setting up, doing all the routing and all that kind of stuff ever again.
Yeah. This just pops into my head when you were talking about that. I was thinking about some of the stuff I've played around with in Ableton Live, where I've tried to create a template for capturing input and then being able to loop it. Is Reaper a good looping platform too, if you're into sort of loop compositions?
I think sequenced loops, but not necessarily real-time loops.
So it's not, you don't use it regularly for capturing a loop idea. It's more like record something and then sequence a loop back, drums and rhythmic stuff.
Yeah, I'll work in 4-bar chunks and just loop and add stuff to it. But I'm not a good enough musician to pull it off effectively, actually playing it in with a keyboard or on drums and stuff like that. So I think third-party plugins are the way to go for that. Or, use Ableton and then mix in Reaper, that kind of thing.
Are there some third-party plugins that you're aware of that you've used in Reaper that are great for capturing loop ideas?
It's not really the way I work, so I don't have a big...
Right. Fair enough. I'll stop asking that question. That was my secret inner DJ coming out right there.
Yeah, well, I do some of that stuff with FX Expansion Geist, It's kind of like a drum sampler thing, but it has its own sampler. It has 8 different engines, which has a step sequencers and 8 or 16 pads. So it's a DAW in itself inside of the DAW. So you can do looping type things like that, but all of those things take some prep work. So you need to have all your tracks set up with, you need your bass tone, you need your lead synth and all that kind of stuff set up in advance. So
Yeah, so that once again, the benefit of templates and being able to construct stuff ahead of time to customize to your own workflow inside of Reaper.
yeah, like making a rock song template, rock song songwriting template. So you have like Easy Drummer set up, and you have a couple guitar tracks and a bass track and a scratch vocal track, and it just has all the inputs selected already. You just have that record arm, it has reverb sends and all that kind of stuff, and you just have to put in the notes. Really, start playing, choose a track and start playing, and you can make 100 songs that way, and not have to worry about plugin selection or anything like that. Things that slow you down.
Now I know when I was exploring some of your work, you had something called Jams on Sunday or Sunday Jams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. Is that a compositional effort on your part, where you kind of you compose the way you like to compose?
Well, I was realizing that after like 10 years doing audio, I was not really writing any of my own songs. And very few were actually getting completed. And I was working on a lot of other people's music, or, doing dialogue editing and all sorts of different things, but not really doing what I got into music or got into audio for. So Sunday Jam is just a effort to do, write songs every day, spend half hour and, just put something down, start something new or work on something that's old. I did like 7 weeks of that, I think. I missed yesterday, which is I feel bad about. But I did spend all day like making templates and stuff like that. So I was playing guitar for several hours yesterday. I just didn't record it.
Hey, you know what? We don't have to record everything we do. It's about creating.
Yeah. So anyways, with the Sunday Jam, I was kind of putting stuff out. I was publishing it kind of as a way to be accountable for it. But I think it's really encouraging just putting in half-hour effort once a week to making music. And if it's good, that's great. And if it's not, so what? At least you're practicing, and maybe stuff will turn into things you can use later, or just throw it away. Doesn't matter. But it's an effort and a routine, and I think that really helps.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting at too is, what are some of the ways that you personally like to compose inside Reaper? Are you grabbing a guitar? Do you play live drums? Do you have drum pads? Do you sort of drag and drop loops from the loop browser? How does all that work for you?
Kind of everything. I'm trying to explore different ways of working, but I do tend to work in, well, it depends on the style of music. If it's guitar-based, then I'll record a scratch track without a click and see how things work, and then maybe create a tempo map from that, add in some drums, and then replace the guitar with something better. If it's synth-based, then I'm usually working in short loops, 4 or 8 bars or whatever, and I'll just like loop a kick drum or something like that and play some synth stuff and then add in another track, and sometimes I'll play it again, or I'll just copy the sounds. A lot of times I'll be using arpeggiators, and I'll take the same chords, take the bass, and then put it onto the lead synth with an arpeggiator, and then be really lazy about it. But if it works, then it works.
Okay. Can you describe to us a little bit of what your studio looks like? I mean, you've got a computer. You said you've got an iMac. I'm guessing you got a guitar off to one side.
Yeah, I've got a few guitars. It's a really old house, and I'm using the living room area as a studio, and it's fairly large. I never measured it, but it's a large room, and I've got acoustic panels across the first half of the room. I have diffusion on my side panels at the reflection point, which is not typically what people do, but I like it. I don't know. I've got a mix of audio and video stuff now because I'm doing so many videos for the Reaper blog. So I've got light stands everywhere and tripods and stuff all over the floor. I got a few guitar amps, nothing too special.
So now for composing with synths and loops and things like that, I'm trying to picture you must have a keyboard there. Do you have sort of like a full 88 keys kind of thing? Or do you find that one of these small portable MIDI keyboards does most of what you need to compose?
I've got a Novation Nocturne 49 on my desk in front of me, which is it's a synth style action, but it has aftertouch and it feels good. It's a nice controller and it has a bunch of extra options with the Automap software. So I'm using that to, like, if I'm not controlling a synth, I'm using it to control Reaper. So I've got various track things, like I can pan, I can solo and mute, and I can call up the automation lanes. I can float all the plugins right from the controller that's in front of me. I kind of forced myself to do that because if I don't have the keyboard in front of me, then I don't use it. I don't end up writing any synth music. So having that in front of me is and forcing myself to use the controllers on it has been helpful, actually.
So now, as somebody who started with physical keyboards and then moved on to the computer, there are many times where I'll go in, I'll pull up a computer synth, and I'll think, wow, that sounds really awesome, and I'll start playing the keyboard, and then I just wish that I could grab a knob on my keyboard and have it turn the knobs on the synth on the screen. How quickly and easy is it for you to assign the knobs on your MIDI controller to the knobs on the synth that's up on the screen?
Most of the time, it's pretty easy. Automap and this particular keyboard adds a little bit of complexity because you have to be on the right mode for it to work. But generally, you click Learn on the plugin, and then you move the knob on the controller, and it's linked, and you're off to.
And is that sort of unique to Reaper at all? I know it's supposed to work in a lot of other DAWs, but it doesn't always seem to for me.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's really unique, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does work. You just have to be like, link it to something that's not already assigned and be on the right mode for the controller.
Okay, cool. And now if our listeners find themselves trying to figure certain things out, they probably can connect with you somehow. Or is there a place for them to go ask questions and learn more about Reaper as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on the Reaper groups on Facebook, and you can always contact me through the contact page on reaperblog.net. There's a contact form there, and it goes right to my email. You can comment on any of the videos, contact me on Twitter @reaperblog. So, I mean, I'm easy to get a hold of and happy to talk Reaper stuff. And if it's a serious problem or you want some in-depth training or something, some one-on-one time with me, I charge $50 an hour for that. And you can find that on the products page on Reaper blog, or just email me and I'll set it up.
Cool. Well, we'll touch on that again here at the end of the podcast, but at least people will hear it twice about knowing how to reach you. So I got a few more questions before we go into the jam, or take a break and then go into the jam session. I love talking about all these details about Reaper, but I'll hit you with some of our usual questions on the show too, Jon, if you're ready for it. So tell us about, a great story about a sort of a failure moment for you in your recording career. You've got a home studio, you've learned how to use Reaper, you've used Pro Tools in the past. You're obviously very advanced with what you do, but we like to hear stories. We like to humanize it a little bit.
Okay, so I guess the year was 2009. My boss he was having an album release party and playing a gig, and he wanted me to record it because he trusted me. And I'm like super good at Pro Tools and stuff. So I figured out what rig we're going to use, and we set it up. And on the day of the recording, my two interfaces wouldn't sync. So I was getting crackles and garbled audio and just nothing working. And it was very, very stressful. And in the end, I did a bunch of noise reduction work on it and got some of the tracks released, but it was overall disappointing. And it was one mouse click away from being perfect.
Oh, no. What was it in the end?
So I had two FireWire interfaces connected to the MacBook Pro. One was the master. Well, actually, I had both of them set as the master. So there was ADAT cables going between them. Both were set to ADAT sync. One of them, the one that's connected to... one of them needed to be set to internal, and one of them needed to be set to ADAT. They were both acting as, I'm not sure if they were both acting as masters or both acting as slaves, but neither one was synced perfectly. And
they're both acting as jerks, it sounds
yeah.
like.
So I'd hit record, they would play fine for, like, everything would be working, I could hear it. And then anywhere from 2 minutes into the song or, 5 minutes, 30 seconds, it was just totally random. They would just start to sync. The audio was coming in kind of between sample buffers or something. So it was just like glitchy. And sometimes it was almost unnoticeable and sometimes it was just unusable.
So what's our takeaway from this lesson? I know exactly what you're talking about, but let's dumb it down for somebody who's going to run into this themselves.
Well, I just, at that time, I just wish there was more time to actually test the system. And I don't know, bring the instruction manual with you, I guess. If you're doing a live gig. Oh, and actually what I should have done was disconnected the second interface and just gone with 8 channels instead of 16 or 12 or whatever it was. I should have just gone with, room mics and vocal, and, I would have had at least that. But in the end, I had a lot of songs that were just unusable instead of just a few tracks that were good.
It's such a bummer. Such a frustration with live stuff too, because you get your one shot,
Yeah.
In the studio, at least you can kind of, put your tail between your legs and go out and ask the band if they mind doing the song again.
Yeah. So in the studio, I haven't really had any big problems like that. I don't do a lot of recording at bands. I mean, I enjoy it a lot, but those kind of gigs just don't come to me. So.
Okay, cool. Well, so, hey, I want to, Rockstars for you, I want to explain that a little bit further. So what Jon was experiencing was a classic clocking issue. And it's when you have different digital interfaces that are all trying to be used together. You have to be very careful about telling them who's the master clock. So one of them needs to be master, the other guys need to be slaves. And then if you accidentally have clocks that are out of sync with each other, you'll get that sound where you're recording and all of a sudden you just get pops and clicks and little real high frequency ticking noises. And Jon, as you explained, that's the sound of the DAW trying to get back in sync together with that audio. So no fun at all. And I've heard a lot of variations of that. And it's really frustrating because that'll sneak up on you in a session when you're sure that you had everything right, but something will just kind of get out of whack. So, Jon, how about a moment of success for you? Something in the studio that really just kind of, where everything put a big smile on your face?
Every other day. I don't know. I can't think of anything right now.
All right. Every other day. There you go. That's the answer. Well, I mean, if you're making music for a living, that's enough to put a smile on your face.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, exactly. Being able, like, ever since I moved to Vancouver, I've been doing audio-related stuff. I haven't had to go back to working retail or fast food or anything like that. I've been lucky enough to make enough to get by and be happy and keep my 2 kids fed, all that stuff. So, I'm really thankful that I have a home studio and I have people that trust me for my brain, things that I know and can do for them. So, yeah.
So would you encourage somebody who's starting out this path and wanting to record and maybe do this for a living that, yes, they can start a home studio and make things work using a DAW like Reaper?
Yeah, definitely you can. I'm not saying to quit your job, but I mean, you should be, before you start charging for your work, you should be pretty good already. Lower your expectations a little bit. You're not going to get rich from doing this, especially not in the first couple of years or maybe the first 10 years. And, you have to be really passionate about it and diversify as well. So I guess right now, like, the Reaper blog stuff is my main income. I'm just kind of realizing this now.
Well, you've put a lot of time and effort into it.
And, I had to put a lot of effort into it over the past 2 years to get where I am now, where I'm trusted and people are recommending me as their first choice for, this kind of stuff. And I have enough trust that I can actually sell things to my audience and they buy it and they don't complain about it or anything like that. And they want to buy more and they're already asking for more things, which is always good.
Well, that's a perfect segue into talking about what you got going on right now. Would you like to tell us what you've just been working on?
Yeah, so Mixing in Reaper Volume 1 and 2 are now out. They are, as you said earlier in the intro, they're a look at how I mix a song And through that, there are tons of mixing tips and production tips and Reaper-specific tips for optimizing workflow. So one example of something that Reaper can do that I haven't seen anywhere else is automatically coloring your tracks based on the name. So you just name your tracks, they color coordinate themselves.
Nice.
So that saves a ton of time. You can also have it add a track icon if you want. It takes a bit of prep work, but really very little. You can also have your markers colored based on the way you title them, things like that. So anyways, I talk about how I organize a song. So I bring in my files and sort them, and I listen to each thing, and you start thinking about how I'm going to process them and what things go where and where the problems are and all that kind of stuff. And then about 5 hours later, I've done the mastering, and I'm thanking you guys for watching. So
Nice. I bet there are a lot of people that would love to start a song and finish it mastered in 5 hours.
yeah, it all takes practice, and can I swear on this?
Sure, man. It's rated explicit on iTunes just so that we have that safety net.
Okay, so when you bring in a song, you don't fuck around. You just get it done. Like you don't mix it in an hour. Don't go as fast as possible. But don't waste your time on things that won't matter. So, that's all I want to say. Just don't fuck around.
All right. Don't fuck around. I love it. So let's see. What else about Reaper? Is it a terribly expensive program for somebody to get if they want to start their home studio?
So if you're a home studio musician and you've done your Reaper demo, you get 60 days for free. After that, they ask for $60 for the small business license.
What, you mean like $60 a minute?
$60 for the license, and you get 2 full versions, which was approximately 5 years when I bought. So I just bought another one for a license at version 5 after buying at version 3.2. So.
Oh, I see. So with each upgrade, it's only $60 to get the newest one when it comes out.
Yeah, but that's not yearly. That's not even every update. Between those, there was 100 updates or so. So,
wow.
So I bought a version 3. I got all of version 3, all of version 4, and then at 5, I paid another $60.
Yeah. Well, I was joking around, of course. What's remarkable about Reaper is that it's so freaking affordable, and it's like this full-featured DAW that has tons and tons of flexibility that you would find on all the other platforms, yet it's $60. And, you can use it for 60 days before you even are asked, I think, politely to pay the $60 and become an owner.
There is also the commercial use license. So if you're making over 20 grand using Reaper, then they ask for $199 for that. And there's an upgrade price, so you pay the difference. And there's no difference in terms of capability features between the demo and the commercial version. So it's just the license, and they trust that even after the 60 days, Reaper is still going to work. So if it takes you longer to learn it, then you can still open up your projects and not worry about it. So they're very. And
the point is, it's very welcoming and it's very trust based, and it's like, hey guys, come use this. And when you're ready, you can afford it. And if the commercial license is the model is one that says, hey, if you can afford this, then that's when you should pay for it, which is great.
Yeah. Maybe that doesn't seem like a good deal, or, not a big deal right now. But think about like if you were using that in Pro Tools and you forgot your iLock. You went to another studio or whatever, you're working on your laptop and you forgot your iLock. You can't open Pro Tools, you can't work on a project, you're losing money. Reaper, you could download it. It takes 2 minutes or less to download it. Install it, and you can be good up and running right away. Even if you don't have your license key, you can still run Reaper in evaluation mode. And there's no limitations there. Just a little thing saying, hey, Reaper's not free, but we want you to use it, so go ahead.
That's very cool, man. That's very cool. And I will tell you that there have been many times when I've been out on a location recording and I won't say there have been many times where I don't have my iLock, but there have been the 1 or 2 times where it's so frustrating. I mean, if it just gets misplaced or it was in the wrong pocket of my backpack
or some days
whatever.
they just don't work. So,
yeah. Well, so very cool, man. So a reminder to you rock stars, Reaper is super affordable. You can start out right now for free. You've got this 60-day window to even use it and decide if it's what you want. Jon is your go-to expert, and so you can find out everything you need to know about it there. And then when you're ready, you can get into mixing in Reaper volumes 1 and 2 and really watch him do a complete walkthrough. And I've watched Jon's work, and he's doing some really cool stuff. How would you describe the music that you are drawn towards, Jon, and the styles of music that you like to work on mostly in your videos?
Well, my own personal music taste is somewhere between post rock and metal, but I listen to everything. You know, I've got a nostalgia thing for like 80s sounding music, synthwave, stuff like that. That's coming out now. That's modern production techniques with vintage synths. I just really dig that. I'm not doing that in my videos yet, but just because I can't write that style of music. But anyways, the Mixing Reaper Volume 1 is a video game metal song, and which has like tons of different genres within it, lots of different sections where I'm doing totally different things. And Mixing in Reaper Volume 2 is a epic post-rock song. Quiet intro, massive chorus, and then it ends, and you know, huge dynamic range. And it was one of the things I had to deal with in mixing that.
Yeah, I will say that mixing songs that have that long, triangle shape from quiet beginning to giant outro is one of the most challenging mixes. So that's awesome that you cover that within this course. People are going to get the double whammy of learning how to use Reaper, learning how to mix in Reaper, and then also learning how to handle one of the biggest challenges when you're mixing.
Yeah. And also in that one, I'm doing a top-down mixing approach, which is not something that's really new to me, but just forcing myself to not focus on the details at first was an interesting challenge, because you listen to the kick drum, you're like, oh, I want to EQ that right now. But I forced myself to work on the master bus and then the drum bus first, and then start EQing. And you can do so much more working at the top level and getting it sounding good just with fader balances and mix bus compression and stuff like that. So it's a different approach, and I think it works really, really well.
So that's top-down mixing. We're not talking about driving around in a convertible and mixing while you're on the highway.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in that and you haven't bought one of those courses yet, there's a bundle for Volume 1 and 2. It's $50, and at the time you're listening to this, that is a $10 savings from buying them individually. You can buy them through Lidge's affiliate link, and support the podcast that you guys like.
Right on. Yes, and Rockstars, I will, thank you for that, Jon. I will include the links to all this stuff in the show notes. You can find it directly on recordingstudiorockstars.com. If you just type in JON for Jon, you'll take you straight to the podcast episode. Or immediately, if you're on your iPhone in the podcast app, you can just simply select this episode, and up will pop the logo. And if you touch that, it'll sort of dissolve on the screen, and you get to see the show notes right there. So you can just click right through. Makes it very easy. Well, cool. We're going to take a break now for just a moment, and we're going to come back with the jam session. Hey everybody, it's Lid Shaw, and I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your time. And as a way of saying thank you, I've created a special mix tutorial just for you, Rockstars, totally free, called the Mix Master Bundle. With it, you get over 2 hours of detailed videos watching over my shoulder as I mix a song in my studio. Plus, I give you the free ebook that explains how I recorded the tracks. And you get downloadable multitracks so that you can practice your mixes, including the Pro Tools session file, using nothing but stock plugins in Pro Tools, all of which you would find in any other DAW, whether you're on Logic or Studio One or Reaper. Maybe you're struggling with trying to improve your mix technique, or maybe you just simply don't have access to multi-track files or can't record a full drum set in your studio. I wanted to give you a chance to create your own mixes from full drum kit, bass, and guitars recorded in my studio. The song is called American Winter, and it's off my instrumental record Skadoosh, and it's all available for you totally free right now. All you need to do to get it is text Mix Master Bundle to 33444 and I'll send it directly to your email. Again, that's Mix Master Bundle with no space to 33444, or you can go directly to mixmasterbundle.com, enter your email, and I'll send all the files directly to you. Thanks so much, rock stars. We'll see you guys in the jam session. Cheers. Hey, rock stars, it's Lid Shaw, and you're listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm back now with our special guest, Jon Tidey of the reaperblog.net. And Jon, are you ready to go into the jam session? Are you ready to jam?
I'm ready to jam.
All right, dude. When you were getting started out in recording, what was one of the big obstacles for you that was holding you back?
It was lack of knowledge. My first recording experiences were with my high school band, and we had no idea how to use the equipment, and we didn't have anyone we could ask. There was hardly any internet back then. The resources that are available now are just amazing. But anyways, I end up having to go to audio school to figure it out. And so lack of knowledge is definitely the biggest hurdle that people will have.
Now, didn't your audio school have a pretty special name to it? I remember seeing that in your bio.
Yeah, Metalworks Institute in Toronto.
That's cool, man. What is Metalworks Institute?
Metalworks was a studio. It's one of Canada's biggest studios, and they at some time they decided to make a school, and I took a 1-year audio production course, and it was pretty intense. It was like 1,000 hours, and yeah, great experience.
So you guys were hammering out license plates and stuff out in the backyard. Is that kind of Metalworks?
It was a really great school, very well balanced curriculum between theory and hands-on stuff. We got to mix on SSLs and Digidesign Icon console. There was 3 different mixing rooms. There was computer lab where we had access to Pro Tools, LE back then. This is back in 2006, so a while ago. And I learned a ton, and it took probably a year and a half of doing stuff on my own for that knowledge to actually click. So you can learn all the theory. You can learn, that a large diaphragm condenser needs phantom power, and it sounds good on this and this and this. You can learn the trivia, but it's not until you start using this stuff that you really get it.
And back then, you also learned that a ribbon microphone doesn't need phantom power.
Yeah.
However, that kind of changed because then they started making phantom-powered ribbon mics, and it just gets confusing after that.
Yeah.
All right, so Jon, how about some of the best advice that you received?
Best advice is using analog-style gain staging. So keeping your levels lower, the way that your equipment is designed to be handled. So, and what I mean by that is not hitting my inputs as hard as possible, just before clipping. You want like minus 18 dB on your DAW meters as the ideal signal level for pretty much every source. And that actually makes mixing easier because I can mix with my faders around unity rather than down at minus 30. So, learning about that kind of stuff, gain staging, making sure that like the input of a plugin is the same as the output of the plugin in terms of volume, that really affects your perception of how things are sounding. Equal loudness.
Good tip, man. I think it's easy to get sidetracked when you're mixing and lose sight of that. And it's also easy to record levels just too hot into the computer, thinking that that's what you want, and then leaving yourself no headroom and no room to work within the plugins themselves.
Yeah, that's the ADAT machine version of digital recording, where it had a high signal, or it had a high noise floor. And now everything is super clean. The noise in your room is going to be way worse than the self-noise of your microphone or the preamp. And so you don't have to worry about noise in your system. It's, don't have to use all the bits. Just get a good 0 VU signal.
Nice. All right. Now, how about a recording tip, hack, or secret sauce? I know you just gave us one, but give us another.
I just gave you one, and I gave you the 2-step mixing process already. Okay, so here is a tip that I have for making your headphones more comfortable, especially if you wear glasses. So the foam padding around headphones that gets squished and stuff, and sometimes the actual driver is like sitting on your ear, or the plastic cover on the driver is sitting on your ear. It gets really uncomfortable in a short period of time. I would take a short piece of tubing or a dead guitar cable, and I would cut that out into like about a 7-inch length, and then tuck that underneath the foam in your headphones. So that spaces it by 1/4 inch, and that little change makes every pair of headphones I've tried it on more comfortable.
That's great, man. What a cool tip. I like it. And that takes us right to the next question, which is a favorite hardware tool for the studio. Tell us something that just seems to make your sessions better when you've got it with you.
I do love my Space Echo, but it's very rarely used.
I love your Space Echo too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great piece of hardware, but it's such a specific sound that is so dark sounding, and using that on a snare drum makes it instantly dubby. And I never work on that style of music, and I never get to use my Space Echo, but I love it.
So that's really a call to all listeners to start sending you more dub music for mixing.
Yeah. All my outboard gear, I know the
feeling. I know the feeling. I have a studio full of the coolest outboard gear, and the more powerful plugins get in the computer and the more convenient they get, the harder it is to just send stuff out to the world and back in again. Time consuming too, because you have to do everything in real time that way.
Yeah, 99% of what I record is my microphone into a preamp, into a compressor, and into the interface. One mic is like what I record more than anything.
Which is another reminder to you, rock stars, to get the sound right at the source. So rather than deciding to wait and save that reverb or that digital or the analog delay on your guitar sound for later, know that you probably won't ever send it back out of your computer to the amp later to get that sound again. So might as well just get it on the way in if you can, All right. So Jon, how about a favorite software tool for the studio?
Besides Reaper, Isotope RX is indispensable. It's something that, maybe you're thinking, I don't work with noisy audio, or I don't work in post-production or anything like that. It's essential. It can declip things. It can depop things. It can decrackle and dehum and just clean up your noise floor better than a gate can. So I do a ton of podcast editing and dialogue editing for my videos, and I cannot work with edit. But also in music projects, it's, sometimes you'll have, let's say the overheads have this loud ticking sound from the stick on the ride cymbal. Sometimes it's just like a really nasty and short click. You run Isotope's declicker plugin on the track, and you don't even hear it anymore.
The plugins that they provide for just putting directly on the tracks are very cool. If you're going to use RX, the editor window that has the graphic editor, do you typically export the audio file, open it up in RX, and then bring it back into your session? Or are there some tricks where you actually are able to use the graphic editor within your Reaper session?
I have a pretty good workflow for it. In Reaper, you can set it up as an external editor, so you can right-click any item and send it to RX. I usually will duplicate that section of the audio. So I'm not working on the entire audio file. I'm working on just the problem section. I mean, it depends totally on what type of audio it is and what the problem is. But so I duplicate the section of that audio and then send that copy to RX, do a processing pass on that, and then send it back in. And I usually go to the spectral editor if it's really bad. I think dialogue can benefit from that if there's a scratchy lav mic or something like that.
I remember when they first came out with the spectral audio technology, and it was this kind of bizarre promise that you could do things like you could take a picture of yourself and just drop it in there and then play it back. It's the reverse. Now the spectral editing is kind of just, part of the tool of how you can manipulate the audio. But it is really cool. I was just watching RX videos the other day, and to learn more myself, it is an amazing tool for fixing stuff in your audio. So remember to go check it out if you can. It's well worth having.
Yeah, I don't use the advanced version. I think that's too expensive. But I'm just, ever since version 2, I've been convinced that the software is magic. It works too good. So yeah, I'm still on version 4. They just released the plugin suite without the spectral editor, and I think right now it's $99. So
Oh wow, that's worth it.
It's a no-brainer for that.
All right, so Jon, how about sharing with us a resource for the business side of recording? Some resource or tip, person, software, technique, whatever you want.
Okay. I've stopped sending invoices. I do a lot of work for clients, international or in States and stuff. Mostly remote work. And I've stopped creating invoices and emailing them and then also sending a PayPal invoice. Now I use paypal.me. I just have a link, add my name to it, and add in how much they owe me, and they pay it. And maybe it's a little less good for my paperwork, which is already really bad. But it's amazing to not have to log into PayPal to send someone a invoice. You can just type in the URL. So like paypal.me/jtidey/300 USD.
Wow, and then that sends them a button that they can just click on to pay you directly?
That's right.
Very cool. I haven't used that yet, so that's a great tip. Thanks for that. Getting paid is an important part about trying to create a business with the studio.
Yeah.
All right, so now here's our sort of hypothetical question. Imagine yourself starting over all over again, or imagine somebody else, and you're giving advice to them, and they are, moving to a new city. They don't know anybody yet. They need to have a simple setup to start recording and, building their studio. Got to find people to record, and they need to make ends meet so that they can continue to do this. What advice do you have for that? What should they start with? How do they find people, and what do they do for a job?
To make money in the recording industry?
Well, I mean,
or just to record music.
If you want to record music,
things.
If you're starting out and you want to be here 5 years from now and still recording music, you gotta, you do have to pay your rent and eat and figure out a way to do it. I mean, do you recommend that people? You can answer that any way you want, by the way.
Okay.
Do you recommend that people, try and get paid for the recordings right away, or do you recommend something else to start out and transition into that?
I would start off with having recording be your hobby until you can afford to either spend more time on it or afford the equipment that really benefits you. But you can do a lot with just a really simple setup like a MacBook Pro and a 2-channel interface and 1 or 2 mics. You can get a lot done with just that.
And then what DAW would you recommend?
It's pretty obvious.
All right, cool. And then you talk about not doing as much working with other bands so much as sort of the composition coming from within the computer, but you do work, you mix for other people.
I do a lot of drum editing for people.
Okay.
As well.
All right. And then, so what advice would you have to somebody starting out who says, I want to do drum editing? How would they get going on that and start making
I would say
income?
Get off my lawn. That's my business.
Right on, man.
You got to be really good, first of all, and don't charge less than me.
Right.
So
Good
the going
fun.
rate is $75 US per song. Don't charge less than that, please.
Right on. Good tip.
Because you can make that. So people will pay that if you're good.
Yeah. And the problem with undercharging for things is it sort of detracts from the possibility or the opportunity as a whole because you set the bar so low that you can't really keep it up.
But also you're devaluing your own time.
Right.
So
right,
I can
exactly.
afford to spend more time on each song, make sure that they're right first time, spend less time going back and forth on that. Maybe I'm not working as much on or doing fewer songs for people, but I know that they're done right. I know that I'm not relying on Beat Detective and stuff like that. I'm actually choosing every edit that I do, and my time is still well paid for. So I've seen people charge $20 per song for drum editing, and I know that at worst, a song could take 8 hours to edit if it's really, really bad. But,
Yeah.
On a good day, it's 45 minutes doing it manually. So, just charge a decent amount for your time, because you'll make money on some projects and you'll lose money on some projects. But if you even it out by charging more to begin with, then it's better for everyone, really.
That's good advice. That's very solid advice. All right. So, Jon, here's the final doozy of a question. How can our listeners, or what's the single most important thing our listeners can do now to be a recording studio rock star themselves?
Okay. So the single most important thing that you can do is to realize that you suck today and you'll be a little bit better tomorrow.
Nice. And so the advice there is don't get hung up on it.
Keep at it. There's a steep learning curve, but if you look back on 60 days of sucky recordings, you're better today than you were 60 days ago.
Yeah. So you don't have to be bummed out about the fact that you think you suck right now. Don't let that bother you. And all you have to do is get incrementally better as you go.
Yep. And there are things where you jump ahead by large leaps. Once you figure out parallel compression, once you figure out mix bus compression, once you figure out how to set pre-delay on a reverb, these are things that improve your recordings and your mixes by a large measurable amount, rather than tiny changes that are unnoticeable from day to day.
Awesome. Well, Jon, great tips, great answers to these questions. Thank you so much for being here on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And again, like I said, the first time I looked at Reaper, I thought it looked incredibly powerful, and I would be thrilled to have a guide like you along the way to learn how to use it. So very cool that you've created this resource for everybody. Can you tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and find you? And let's give them a reminder to Mixing Reaper Volume 1 and 2 as well. And we'll say goodbye after that.
Well, Lidge, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. You guys can find me at so many different websites. reaperblog.net, audiogeekscene.com, my home recording show podcast at homerecordingshow.com, beatfix.com if you are interested in drum editing services. That's beatfix with 2 X's. And if you're interested in my mixing classes in Reaper, mixinginreaper.com.
Very cool. Awesome stuff. And then Rockstars, once again, I'll include all this in the show notes. You can find those directly on recordingstudiorockstars.com, or just click through on your podcast app if you're on your iPhone right now, and the links will take you directly there. So, Jon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Very, very cool to have you here, and I look forward to meeting you in person and talking to you again soon.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right, dude. Cheers, man. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.